Hey guys, I just want to explain your additional examples from today. So I'm going to start on the first half, the top half here. So let me slide that down. All right, so for this one, we're using this equation here. So we have the equation already listed, and it's already in our y equals mx plus b form. Remember, y equals mx plus b. That's what we're going to be using here for our linear equations, so equations that make a line. And recall that m, that's your slope of a line. That's that rise over run. It's your rate of change. It's how far you go up or down versus left, right. And then B, remember, is your y-intercept. And remember, y-intercept is where it crosses your y-axis. So for our slope for this one, we're going to look at our equation, and when you see that, the number right in front of that x is 2/3, so our slope is 2/3. So our rise is 2 and our run is 3. Our y-intercept is 4, which means it crosses at the y-axis at 4. And our story, we're going to think about what is something that you can start with 4, because remember 4, our y-intercept is our start. And then our slope, remember, is the change. So think about what is something that you can start with 4 and then have a rate of change of 2 every 3 of something. So one example, you might say, I just joined Facebook and I started with 4 friends and I'm getting 2 more every 3 days. Or something like that, something where you start with your y-intercept, your 4, and then the rate of change is 2/3. So looking at our table here, for our table, remember our y-intercept is 4, and we know that our y-intercept, our x, has to be 0. So let's just make sure you guys get that here. So if I have my y-intercept of 4, that means it crosses my y-axis at 4. And you notice my 0, my x value has to be 0 in that spot. And so that is one of the points in my table. And then I know that I have a change in my x and y is 2/3. So if I have that, that's my rise over my run. And the rise is the change in y. And so I know I'm going to go up 2 for each of these points in my table. And then remember, my run was 3. And so I'm going to go up 3 for my x values. So my rise and my run is done. My table is set. So I have my y-intercept on this graph. I graphed it at 4. And then I know my rise is 2 and my run is 3. So I'm going to go up from my point that I did my y-intercept. I'm going to count up 2, 1, 2. And then I'm going to go to the right, or positive, 3. 1, 2, 3. And I know that following those points, that's going to be another point on my graph. So I'm going to graph him. Then I'm going to check it again. I'm going to go up 2, 1, 2, and then I'm going to go over 3, 1, 2, 3, and that is another point. So I'm going to carefully try and graph these guys. It's kind of tricky on here, but carefully try to graph those guys. And I want to have arrows on both sides to show that it goes on forever and forever and forever. Let's try another one. All right, this second one is just a little bit different because we have the graph and we have to come up with everything else for this graph. And so I'm looking at a few things, few important details here. So I know that it crosses my y-axis at 2. So I know if my equation is y equals mx plus b, I know that which one of these is going to be my 2. Where's my y-intercept? It's the letter B. So I'm going to put a 2 there. Then I know my y and my x are going to stay there because those represent data points or points on my graph. Now I just have to figure out my m. Now remember, m is our slope. It's our rise over our run. So we have a reliable point there, right there on that y-axis. That's a reliable point. Then I'm going to hunt for another point that's super easy for me to find. This one right here, do you see how it's right on those 2 lines? So I know for sure that I'm not going to end up with a decimal or a fraction or something funky like that. So I'm going to count from one to the next to see how I get there. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to count up 1. So I was up 1. I have a rise of 1. And then I look at my run, and my run in this case is 1, 2, 3, 4. So my rise over run equals 1/4. So my slope is 1/4. Now we already knew that the y-intercept was 2, so I can pop that in there. Our equation, all we do is just plop in the points that we figured out. So we figured out the slope was 1/4, x plus our y-intercept is 2. For the story, think about something that you would start with 2, because remember your start is your y-intercept, so start with 2, and that your rate of change, your rise over your run, is 1/4. I'm trying to learn how to knit, so I might say I have started with 2 scarves done, and I'm making 1 more scarf every 4 days. Totally not true. It takes me about a month to do 1, but you could just kind of have something where you start with 2 and your change is your 1/4, your slope. So that's the story. Then for your table, your XY table, for this one, always start with that y-intercept. So we know that for our y-intercept was 2, and when we have our y-intercept, our x has to be 0. And then our rise over our run, remember, was 1/4. So the 1 is our rise. Our rise is our change in y. So change in y was 1. So all of these are going to be plus 1. And then our run was 4. So our run was adding 4 for each one. So we just put those into our table. And that's it.